Aloha, namaste. This is Radha, and I'm here to talk about our full moon. It is happening tomorrow, the 12th of February at 3:53 a.m. here in Hawaii, which is 5:53 a.m. in Pacific time. So this is happening at the very, very end of Cancer in a star called Aslesha. It's in what we call the Gandanta point, which is the last degree of Cancer and the first degree of Leo. This karmic knot happens between all the water and fire signs. And it's a place where we really need to untie our subconscious holdings, particularly in this place where the star Aslesha is represented by the naga, which is the serpentine kingdom. And in the mythology, the naga is like holding up our living dream that we're experiencing. If you can picture Krishna or Vishnu, excuse me, floating on Anantasesha on this like many-headed serpent that is supporting him while he dreams up the next reality for us. And when we think about what holds up our waking reality, our thoughts, our emotions that we're aware of, our actions that come from those thoughts and emotions, we recognize that there's that subconscious area, right? And it's a scary realm for some of us. And for other people, it's a realm they can get lost in. It's a place where we get so attached to what's happening down there that we have trouble pulling ourselves back out of it. It can be a very dark underworld, and it can also be very fantastical and dreamlike. And so in this star, we're called upon to really access the power of being able to go deep and being able to look at what's beneath the surface, but also to be able to come back up again, right? We don't want to stay stuck there. And you can see in the mythology the story of Garuda and his birth in this Naga kingdom. His mother was she lost a bet to her sister, and she ended up being a slave to her sister and all of the many children that she had. She had the snake kingdom, and so he Garuda won. Basically they were stuck in servitude. And in order to get out of servitude, he was able to go get the nectar, the Amrita, from the great churning of the Milky Way and bring it back down to the snakes. And if he was able to do that, then they would free him and his family. Well, he managed to get the Amrita and bring it back down. And at the last minute, Indra came in and knocked it out of his hands and swooped away with it. But a little bit of the pieces of it landed on the grass there, and the snakes lapped it up, and they received some of it without all of it. It's the great, immortal nectar. So there was this immortality imparted, but not the full kind. And Garuda was also released from his bonds because he did his part. It wasn't his fault that Indra came and swept in and did that. And this image of Garuda like living down in this place, and Garuda, for those of you who don't know, he's this man eagle. He's the vehicle for Vishnu. And his ability to go down into that realm and having been birthed from that realm, right? That's where his egg hatched. And then being allowed to be free and come back up to the higher realms and even the highest loka beyond the middle plane. And this is what we all want, right? We all want to be able to go down, experience our pain, our trauma, our whatever the things are that we've, been through, and also the feelings that have accumulated there. When you hear about child psychology, a lot of what children reckon with is actually happens before they're the age of 3, before they have a conscious awareness of what's happening. And that's part of the problem. They can't just go in and talk to a therapist about it because they don't have the words at that time. They don't have the language to describe what's happening. It's impressions, it's images, it's feelings, it's experiences, and it gets described to them at a later point, but they don't have the capacity to really understand what's happening yet. And so much of what's in the subconscious, we have that sort of infantile relationship with, where we can't actually understand what happened. And we can come up out of it, but some of it still lingers. Some of that struggle still lingers. And you can see there's a later part of the story where Vasuki is holding on to well, he's being used as part of the turning rod, and he's like basically stuck, like dead weight. And they ask Garuda to pull him up, and he refuses to come. And then as soon as Shiva reaches down, he just comes right up, wraps himself around his arm and lifts up out of there. So that that story kind of shows some of the lingering of our subconscious residue, even once we fly up out of what is holding us back. So this star is really powerful. It has a lot of different symbolism and levels of evolution that are available to us, as well as this really deep shadow side where we cling. It's the clinging star, right? It's the star when you think of like a snake wrapping itself around something and suffocating it. It's in the sign of Cancer, which is the sign of the mother. We have the star Pushya right before it, where we're nurturing and nourishing, and like a mother might give to her newborn child. But then in Aslesha, we start to look at a mother who's refusing to let her kid go. The mom who won't let her child go play with anyone or won't let him do anything and is constantly watching his every move and doesn't even want to let him leave the house when he becomes an adult. So that clinging nature, we have to recognize that wherever we're clinging, we're holding on, we're not letting go. We're not relaxed. We're in a state of tension with that object or that person or whatever the concept is that we are so attached to. And in, the Ashtanga and the 8 limbs of yoga, one of our like we have these yamas and niyamas that make up the first 2 limbs. And these are things that we want to observe and things that we want to avoid or like have some containment around, which yama is like this control that we have over something. And the niyamas are things that we are observing. And aparigraha is one of these things called non-grasping, where our goal is to not hold something so tight. And this can show up with material things. Some people really cling to material things. But again, we're in the sign of Cancer. So there's this strong emotional grasping that can happen here. This holding on very tight to our emotional connection to something, even if it's not healthy for us, even if it's not good for us, even if all the outside parts of it have moved on or need to move on, because everything's in motion, right? Energy needs to go somewhere. It can't just stay stuck. Nothing is just staying there. Everything is always moving. Even when something is stationed, even when a planet is stationed or something in our life feels like it's stuck, it's a feeling that it's stuck, but it's a feeling we're railing against because we're actually always in motion. All of our cells are in motion. Everything's in motion. So to stay in one place and to not move in some direction is to be against nature. And so our choice at that point has to be either to wind tighter and suffocate the life out of it, or to release and start to loosen our grip and allow ourselves to find spaciousness. And in that spaciousness, if it's meant to be, it'll cling to us in a way. It'll come back, or it'll still be there. It'll stay there if it's fasted with something that's worthy of holding on. If there's a real love, or if there's real connection, if we've done our job as a parent, and we haven't scared our children away, they're still going to be there. It's just going to evolve the way that it is. And so this is part of our learning lesson, and it's part of our path. And the next place that we go, and I'll just share my screen really quick. I'm not going to talk too much longer, I promise. But the next place that we go is really important to recognize. This is very much at the end, right? This Gandanta point, like I said, is the last degree of Cancer, the first degree of Leo. And it's very quickly that the moon goes, that was 20 minutes later, that the moon is already in Magha in Leo. And Magha is the other side of this Gandanta, right? Where we're suddenly in this new land and we're like, what happened? The knot keeps us tied. It keeps us stuck. We don't remember where we came from. We don't remember the subconscious path we were taking. And then we land in this new place of the father, of kings, of power, of leadership and authority. Yet we have to reach back to what is available to us, which is our lineage, and see what has come before us. What have our predecessors done? And sometimes that could be painful to look at as well. but there's also always some lesson and some wisdom that can be passed. Sometimes in our present day, we have a tendency to kind of shun our ancestors or look down on those who came before us, particularly if we come from more of a Western lineage. But there's always wisdom to be passed forward as well. And it might not be your immediate ancestors that you're able to receive that from, but maybe even farther back than then. And sometimes it's another lineage that you tune into. But this capacity to know how we got where we got is important. It's an important thing to recognize. And then we see that really it's not much longer before the sun is also moved into Aquarius. So, this is 7 a.m. Hawaii time, which is significantly earlier than other times, but that's 9 in Pacific time. We have the sun already moved into Aquarius. So they were hanging on by a thread in the Cancer Capricorn axis. And now we have this, stellium in Aquarius. Mercury has just moved in the day before, and the sun, 2 days before, technically on Monday. And then the sun has moved in, and Saturn was already there. So now we're recognizing that we have this alchemy of power and the resources that we collectively share and hold, and how do we want to reflect upon that power. And they're not in the full moon dynamic anymore, because by the time the sun moves in, the moon is already past that. But we have to look at how that runs in our own family lines, how that runs in our little worlds around us, whether that's your job, whether that's you're in a family and it's in your household, whether it's, you're a parent and it's within the school or whatever kind of environment your child's in. These different power dynamics are always playing out. And this is going to be a big theme in our time to come as the nodes shift into this axis as well. So it's kind of like a foreshadowing, right? Of where we need to look, and where this next period of time that the sun is shining its bright light, and our sense of power and our sense of authority and our sense of leadership and our connection to source, which is the most important part of leadership that's often missing, right? In today's day and age, the kings, those who hold power, often have no connection. In the past, that was a huge part of being royalty, was having a relationship to God, to source. They were the first epoch of that. And that's where the allegiance came from, right? Is the kings are receiving this power directly, this insight, and they're ruling for the best of everyone. And that filters down to our parents, right? Our parents are then the kings and queens of our own little world. And we look up to them and we respect them. That's greatly missing in our world, in our Western world, that lineage of respect. And it's easy to say why, right? It's like, well, they don't earn this respect. Our leaders aren't acting very well. Our parents didn't do a good job. This kind of storyline that we have so heavily embedded in our culture. But again, there's always another way to look at it. And one of the practices that can be very powerful, particularly for people of Western lineage, is to step into a feeling of reverence, or a recognition that just by somebody's parents being their parents, there's some respect and honor that can be given, or recognition of respecting and honoring those who are holding leadership positions, or our elders and our ancestors. And it can be very, very difficult to do that in our world. I'm not discounting that, but that capacity to do that helps us greater understand what it is we're rebelling about in the Aquarius side of things. It helps us understand what we want to do differently, because all too often when there is this idea of, resistance and revolution, it's literally mimicking the thing that they're resisting against, right? The actual movement will have all the same patriarchal colonial undertones that they are being oppressed by. And the reason is because that's the dynamic in which we are raised and taught and learning within. So there's a need to do something different in Aquarius. There's a need for the future to be something that has not yet happened. We can't sit and say the best thing has already happened so long ago. This is like the Aquarius lesson, right? There's so much wisdom to be gleaned from the past, and we need to make sure to get that. We need to make sure to recognize that, to learn from that, And yet at the same time, the best things that can be can't already have happened. We can't, that would be so bleak, right? To look forward to just constant degradation and lessening and everything becoming more horrific that's not a future any of us want to look for or work for, right? At that point, what would be the point? So we have to imagine in this mental realm of Aquarius, a future that has not yet been and that can be. And we don't want just the people who are holding power to be the ones imagining that and making it the way they want it to be. We want people who are behind the scenes. We want the geniuses. We want the artists. We want the people who care, the humanitarians. We want the environmentalists. We want the people who love animals. We want all these people who are here in our society right now, friends with you, watching this video, perhaps friends of mine, friends of yours, that are already doing these things on a small scale behind the scenes in their own way, to step forward and show us the future that we want, to help lead each little pod of us in our own way forward, because that's the future that we are creating. And so this is where we're moving from our clinging, but we have to look at where we're clinging first, right? Before we can do each thing, we have to do the step before it. Where are we clinging? Well, in Capricorn, it's to our fear, to our have-tos, to what we must do, to the fact that if we don't plow this field, we won't eat today. If we don't lay this brick, we won't have a home today, or the rain will come in through our shelter. This have-do nature of Capricorn, keeping your nose to the ground and doing. And then Cancer, where we're emotionally clinging and afraid to let go. Because sometimes, the unknown is so much scarier than like there's an expression. I had a boss who used to say to me all the time, it's like the devil you know is better than the devil you don't know, I guess, something like that. Where it's like I'm keeping this terrible employee because at least I know her problems and I don't know the new person's going to have problems too, and I don't know what those problems are. And that's a lot of our mentality in this world. It's like, well, we're going to keep this system going the way it's going because at least we're familiar with all of its problems, or we're going to continue down this paradigm that we've been doing that's really clearly not working, because we're afraid of what's on the other side of it. And so this is where we need to let go of that fear. So blessed full moon. And if you would like to know how this full moon lights up your particular life, I do a weekly personal forecast for each of the signs. And I talk about what this full moon means for you, what it's highlighting for you, and also what the sun and Mercury moving into Aquarius means for you this week, because those shifts happened as well. It's at patreon.com, Radha Home Astrology. And if you like this video, you can like, comment, or share and help me out. Many blessings and namaste.